Humans are incredibly fascinated with the unknown, especially with instances where the truth may never be found. Today I will share with you what I believe are 5 unsolved disappearances you may have never heard of. Number 5. The disappearance of Asha Degree. On the early morning of February 14, 2000, in Shelby, North Carolina, a 9-year-old girl by the name of Asha Degree packed up her backpack and left her home, regardless of the pouring rain and wind that had been ongoing. Her father recollects that he heard her bed squeak at approximately 2:30 a.m., but did not proceed to check on her. Motorists recount seeing her walking along the highway, then abruptly running into the nearby woods. One motorist said that he saw a small child walking along the road in the severe storm, turned his car around a few times, then saw the child disappear into the woods. That morning, a few hours later, her parents discovered she was missing. They called the police moments later. That day, police scrounged the neighborhood and picked up on a few tips from a few motorists who recounted seeing her. 3 days later, on February 17th, food wrappers were found inside a shed along the highway where Asha went missing. A pencil, marker, and hair bow were also found and linked to be hers. Flyers were posted everywhere, and law enforcement conducted a 3-mile radius search. No new findings would arise till a year later in 2001, when Asha's backpack was found in a construction site. Inside were clothes and family photos. Recently, in 2016, another tip was picked up by the FBI that Asha may have been seen getting into a dark green car near the highway, but the case ends there. No one is for certain about what happened to Asha Degree. Some believe she may have ran away from family abuse, and experts believe foul play was suspected. But what do you think? Number 4. Madeleine McCann. During the dark hours on May 3, 2007, Madeleine McCann, a 3-year-old girl, disappeared from her family's vacation home in Algarve, Portugal. The parents and some friends went dining around 8 p.m. on May 3rd and left their children to sleep back in the apartment. The parents routinely checked up on them until around 10 p.m. that the mother could not find Madeleine. The previous times they had checked up on their children, they left the door to the children's room slightly ajar, but the last time they checked up, the door was completely wide open. They were immediately considered suspects as Portuguese officials could not find any other way she could have just gotten up and left. What is very disturbing is earlier that morning during breakfast, Madeleine asked her parents, quote, "Why didn't you come when my brother and I cried last night?" After she disappeared, her parents began to wonder if someone had entered their room. One of the very few possible leads comes from a family friend who was dining with the McCanns that night Madeleine disappeared. She recalls seeing a tall European man walking on the beach carrying a child wearing pink pajamas. After their quarrel with Portuguese officials, the McCanns set up their own private investigation. The case became one of the most reported missing persons cases in modern history. There are speculations that the disappearance was a result of burglary, sexual assault, or just a kidnapping. Many still believe the parents are still the culprits. What do you think, though? Number 3. Karen and Michael Reinert. This is one of the most unusual cases I have ever come across. On the night of June 22nd, 1979, an 11-year-old girl named Karen Reinert and her brother Michael went missing in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. They were last counted for getting into their mother Susan's orange hatchback before driving off. 3 days later, Susan's body was found nude in her trunk in a parking lot of a motel. Her children were nowhere to be found. The mother was found beaten, bound with chains, and morphine was found in her system. Now for some background. Susan had an affair whilst married to her ex-husband. They eventually divorced. 3 months before they disappeared, Susan was under the impression that her and her boyfriend, William Bradfield, were going to get married. She gave Bradfield large quantities of money to invest under her name, and she had taken out a $730,000 life insurance policy with Bradfield as his sole beneficiary, as well as a beneficiary in her will. Susan was unaware Bradfield was dating other women too. All three were planning on meeting Susan's boyfriend on the day they vanished. A widespread search was conducted, but nothing turned up. A few years later, Bradfield was charged with mishandling the money he received from Susan. Shortly before Susan was murdered, he invested some of the money at a relatively high interest rate. He spent a few years in jail for theft and conspiracy to murder for Susan and her children. The case becomes even more bizarre. The principal of a local high school where Bradfield worked, Jay Smith, was found linked to the murder. He was convicted of the murder of Susan and her children in 1985 while serving a 5-year sentence for drug charges. Officials believe Smith planned the murders and Bradfield carried them out. To this day, all possible people linked to the disappearance and murder have passed away, and the remains of Karen and Michael have never been found, even around the possible burial site. The case is still open, and if you have any information, please call the number in the description. Number 2. Charles Allen Jr. Charles Allen Jr., also known as Neil Babson Maximus, a name he legally changed to, was a college student and former professional gamer. He suffered from bipolar disorder. On the morning of October 13, 2007, Maximus was reported to have attempted to break into a house, and the house owner confronted him. Maximus said he was trying to find his friends. He then apologized and disappeared into the woods. After his mysterious vanishing, Maximus's car was found in a university parking lot. His backpack was found on the side of a road, and his shoes were found off another road near a forest. His keys and phone were missing. He was reported to have approached a truck driver not far from where he was last sighted. The case stops there, but it is still quite intriguing. The last time he spoke to his family reported him sounding paranoid, and he talked about moving out of state to Florida or Texas. Law enforcement could find no evidence linking him to traveling to either state. Charles Allen Jr. seems to have fallen off the face of the earth, as his credit cards and phone haven't had any activity since he disappeared. What do you think happened to Allen? Number 1. Timmothy Pitzen. On the morning of May 11, 2011, in Aurora, Illinois, Amy Pitzen picked up her son Timothy from school. She then took her car to an auto repair shop, and her son were dropped off at the nearby zoo. After her car was serviced, they spent the night at a resort in Gurnee, Illinois. The husband, James Pitzen, reported them both missing and tried to go pick up their son from school and found out Amy had already taken him out. The next day, on May 12th, Amy drove to the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin. Later that day, Amy had made several phone calls to her family, saying Timothy and her were safe. Timothy was heard in the background, and that was the last time anyone heard from him. That night, Amy was spotted buying art supplies in a store, but Timothy was nowhere to be seen. She checked into a motel around 11 p.m. That next morning, she took her own life, slashing her wrists and neck, while taking an overdose on antihistamines. Staff found her body the next day. A note was found, and 2 letters were sent out to her family saying Timothy was okay, and with people who cared about him. Another note said they would never find Timothy. Various belongings were missing, like the car seat in Amy's car. Traces of Timothy's blood were found in the back seat, but the age of the blood could not be determined. Amy's car was relatively dirty, and forensic experts believe it was parked on gravel. Authorities also believe that Amy had planned Timothy's disappearance for quite some time, as in previous months she was reported that she took separate trips to the same area where Timothy was last seen. Amy also suffered from depression. She had a secret email address too, but that showed no evidence. The case went cold for 2 years, till 2013, when Amy's cell phone was found on the side of a highway, but no records could be found. Some believe either Amy killed Timothy, she gave him to child traffickers, or an unknown cult she was associated with. No one knows for sure.